Okay, so last time we were looking at some of the some issues around the baseball bat, and now we're going to jump right back in to Burks, and we're almost kind of done with this analysis. I know it's been a little tedious, but just kind of seeing some just how different his statements are, because usually we have these like little clips of what Burke is saying, like some of the smaller ones, but when we look at this, you know, Dr. Phil interview, it's kind of like, wait, you guys are saying two different things. So let's continue.
Yeah.
And I think your dad had said he used the flashlight that night to put you to bed, and then you snuck downstairs to play.
Yeah, I had some toy that I wanted to put together. I remember being downstairs after everyone was kind of in bed and wanting to get this thing out.
Did you use the flashlight so you wouldn't be seen?
I don't remember. I just remember being downstairs. I remember this toy.
Did you see your sister over there with a baseball bat or a flashlight?
Before we get started, got to send a special shout out to Trace the Ace once again for coming through. Appreciate your consistency. I appreciate your love. You don't have to do it, but you do. So I want to say thank you. And I got to give you a hug. Appreciate you. Much love. And I hope you enjoy the next video. Thank you so much.
Now we turn to a Dr. Phil exclusive.
Stunning new revelations about the mysterious death of a little girl, JonBenet Ramsey. Mark Beckner, who took over the case in September of '97, has given a lengthy interview on Reddit. And perhaps the biggest revelation is exactly how JonBenet actually died. We know from the evidence that she was in the very hard with an unknown object, possibly a flashlight or similar type item. Put her into unconsciousness, which could have led someone to believe she was dead. It came 45 minutes to 2 hours after the strike.
Did you see your sister over there with a baseball bat or a flashlight?
Absolutely not.
If someone in your house did, do you think you would have heard it?
Probably. Yeah.
There was a book written by the lead investigator in this case that set forth some of his theories. He says one of the reasons that he believes that you are the...
Now, we know that John and Patsy, from one of my previous videos, we know that John and Patsy, from their interview answers, they struggled to respond to this flashlight question. They never took ownership of the flashlight. What they did was same thing they always do. They said, "Oh, looks like I have a mag flashlight like that," but because they were asked, how did this flashlight get on the counter? Oh, I don't think I would have set it there. And we talked about how Patsy said that John usually comes in and sets things on the counter as sort of like a catch-all, whether it's like paperwork or stuff like that. It's typically what she said, to be fair. But John had, John would not admit to having a flashlight. He said, my flashlight doesn't look like that. I think, my son gave me a flashlight for like Father's Day or Christmas or something like that. But that doesn't look like mine. That looks gray. And they told Patsy it looks gray because it's been processed. But can you tell me, and we put like powder on it. We put processing powder on it. But can you tell me if this is your flashlight or whatever? Do you have one? And they said, well, I can't really tell for sure because, it looks dirty and dusty and not neat. And, mine looks clean. And that's what John and Patsy said. Patsy said, and John was like, yeah, I didn't really use a flashlight. We had a bunch of duds, a dud flashlight. I think initially I put batteries in a flashlight. It didn't work. And this is coming from their interviews. And so, yeah, essentially, and John is saying, I don't really use flashlights and whatnot. And Patsy was like, well, I think John had a flashlight in his plane. Or, I think John had a flashlight in his car that he would use out in his car or out in the garage or something like that. And I think they drove a Jeep. I think John drove a Jeep. So, John was like, yeah, or Patsy was like, well, John would use it. Like within the same interview, I believe in 1998 when John was denying it, Patsy was like, yeah, John had a flashlight. Now we did have some duds. I think Burke had some like little round flashlights that didn't work. And we would keep the flashlights over here in this drawer. And both Patsy and John said that we'd keep it over here in this little drawer over here. But, John would use it. John would be the one who would be using it and stuff like that. So, I'm not sure. And so while John never admitted to using a flashlight, um, Patsy said John used a flashlight. And so Dr. Phil is asking, sort of like and I don't see any evidence for this, but Dr. Phil is kind of asking an assumed question of, your dad said he put you to sleep with a flashlight. Now, apparently, John has admitted to this according to Dr. Phil. And so, and I don't know where that is, but John has admitted to this according to Dr. Phil. And Burke is not discrediting that statement, but he's saying, yeah, I did get up. I don't know if I used a flashlight, but he's not discrediting the fact that his dad used a flashlight to take him upstairs and put him to bed. Now, from there, we don't know where the flashlight ended up. If it ended up, kind of on, the dresser or what, on the nightstand or what. But there seems to be the use of a flashlight. And so the flashlight is kind of floating in and out. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you're lying, you can't remember everything that you said. And so some of this stuff that should not be the case, where people should say, if you're not involved in a crime, you should say, I never said that. I never said that. My word's been consistent. I've never said that. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't know anything about that because I didn't do it. I didn't have anything to do with it. I don't know what you're talking about. That would be consistent. But we get this. I'm not sure if I had that. I don't think, I can't say for sure if I ever did. I can't say, might not, don't know, not sure, uncertain, all of that. But then all of a sudden we show up years later and it's like, oh yeah, I did have a flashlight. Really? You said that you were uncertain. All of a sudden you pop up 15 years later telling me, 20 years later, telling me that you used a flashlight. That's weird. Because what's funny is, you told me that you couldn't remember what you wore 2 years after the fact. You had to look at pictures. But you remembered that you had a flashlight. Help me understand. Help me understand that. Okay. But now Burke is like, oh, I don't know, but maybe.
Culprit here is that on the day of your sister's murder, you never ask about her welfare.
Well, it's pretty much just, hey, we can't find your sister. What do you think happened? And I was like, well, she's probably just hiding somewhere. Like, you guys looked around the house. The next time I talked to somebody she's dead.
What did you really find out? House, and I saw him in his and said,
Thank you. I think people are reacting to the fact that you seem to be unbothered by all of this.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you I was very emotional at the Fernies and I would just randomly cry out of nowhere. I guess it's a combination of sitting in there with this weird guy that I'd never talked to before and asking me all these personal questions. It's a combination of that. Just kind of, at some point, you have to move on. And I'm not saying I moved on then. It might have been kind of the other end because I didn't really get it. But if you got to stop crying at some point, I guess. Point you have to move on. And I'm not saying I moved on then. It might have been kind of the other end because I didn't really get it. But if you got to stop crying at some point, I guess.
So the lead investigator thinks you're the culprit because you had previously been with JonBenet. Had you ever attacked your sister?
No.
Did you hit your sister with a golf club?
Coming up.
JonBenet Ramsey was rather brutally on the night of the murder.
Straight up. Did you ever JonBenet?
and he, he was out there with the little wiffle ball golf balls. She walked up behind me around that time and clutched her around the cheek. She screamed bloody murder.
Did you hit your sister with a golf club?
Not on purpose. She was standing behind me and I went so bad.
So you accidentally
Can you please help me understand? Because this is what we're talking about. I'm so happy. I'm so happy he did this.
She
What was funny about that? She walked up behind me.
was standing behind me, and I
Didn't we talk about Burke's golf swing? Because in 1997, Patsy in her interview said Burke JonBenet in the head or in the eye, I'm sorry, in the eye and the leg. And we asked, how exactly would JonBenet have been in the leg? I could understand in the eye, somebody comes and you swing like this, and that club comes back like that. Boom, you're standing right behind me. I got you. How, when would that have a chance to hit the leg? Because now Burke is telling the same story, and he's saying, "Yeah, I hit her and I swung like this. She walked up behind me. Boom." No recounting of the leg. Only Patsy recounts the leg because Patsy, as a mom, remembers the leg. How exactly did you hear sister in the leg? How? Because I was like, I knew he had to swing like this. It's a normal golf swing. So how would you or strike both places? I'm confused.
So you accidentally clipped her in the cheek, I believe it was,
something like that. Yeah,
on your backswing.
yeah.
Okay. Was that on purpose?
No,
Did you
absolutely.
did you intentionally JonBenet in the with a golf club?
No.
There was some theory that someone had used a stun gun on her.
Yeah.
And then an alternate theory was that the spread of the marks that they were alleging might be a stun gun were actually the ends of train tracks that might
Yeah.
have been poked into her. You had a train set at home, right?
Yep.
Did you ever hit her with it? Did you ever hit her with the train tracks?
No.
Did you ever
No.
poke
No.
her with the train tracks?
The moment you said that, I was like, how would I even do that? Like,
Yeah.
I never did anything like that.
The autopsy did not identify that your sister was, but experts that have analyzed it said it was possible. Did you ever have any knowledge or suspicion that JonBenet had been, or in any way?
No.
This wasn't anything you'd ever heard, thought of, suspected. She never said anything to you. You never saw anything that.
Absolutely nothing that would lead me to believe that anybody was there in any way.
I asked you just straight up. Did you ever, JonBenet?
No, absolutely not.
Let's clear this up once and for all. Did you do anything to harm your sister? Did you murder your sister, JonBenet? Next week, Burke. This wasn't anything you'd ever heard. You had a train set at home, right?
Yep.
Did you ever hit her with it? Did you ever hit her with the train tracks?
No.
Did you ever
No.
poke
No.
her with the train tracks?
The moment you said that, I was like, how would I even do that? Like,
Yeah.
I never did anything like that.
The autopsy did not identify that your sister was, but experts that have analyzed it said it was possible. Did you ever have any knowledge or suspicion that JonBenet?
Because when Dr. Phil is asking Burke this question, Burke is like looking down. Like he'll look up and then he'll look down. And it's like, okay.
They had been, or in any way?
No.
This wasn't anything you'd ever heard, thought of, suspected. She never said anything to you. You never saw anything that.
Absolutely nothing that would lead me to believe that anybody was there in any way.
Yes, you just struck.
I want to mention just like a couple of things with respect to like this area in terms of this question about the mistreatment part, the inappropriate way, and then going back a little bit to um, something he said about the golf club. The first thing, well, I'll touch on the golf club. When he had sort of this verbal backpedaling, um, when he said there was a little bit of ambiguity there when he said not on purpose. Um, and he said not on purpose. And I sort of characterize it as like him going up and then like went up and then went back. It's like he's kind of backpedaling, like not on purpose, you know, and he's like thinking about it, like as he's doing it. And so technically, it's an act of denial. It's sort of like a denial of intent, right? Um, but not of the act itself, which could, from what I'm understanding, from what I think, this is just what I think. He's denying it in a way. I'm denying my intent. I didn't intend to do this, but I'm not denying the act itself. I know I did it, but you know, you might be trying to accuse me of saying I did it on purpose. I'm denying that I did that. And so that kind of that might reveal some sort of level of inner conflict. Um and in a way, it could sort of suggest that he's trying to avoid lying while still protecting himself. So like if you and there are some other things um that were quite interesting, and I'll kind of jump up to those in terms of um like the inappropriateness um in the direction of JonBenet. So when he's asked directly by Dr. Phil whether he was involved in hurting JonBenet in any way, his nonverbal behavior kind of gets interesting. At two distinct moments when he was asked, because I think he was sort of asked twice, at two distinct moments, um, his eyes got big, they widened. Once after denying involvement, um, and then again when responding, absolutely not. He said, absolutely not. Both times, Burke's eyes noticeably widened from what I saw. And so this kind of widening to me, I think, can be understood as sort of like this physiological arousal response, signaling sort of like a spike in emotional intensity. So when we're talking about this act toward JonBenet, there is a spike of some reason. For some reason, there is a spike twice because he did it twice around this. So to me, there's an importance, a significant importance around this. While we're trying to downplay it and say, oh no, you know, nothing happened here, nothing to see, nothing there, da da da, this and that and the third. Now, to be fair, could also be the case that when somebody says, you know, whatever, man, absolutely not. I had nothing to do with it. You could also widen your eyes. Um, but anyways, there is significance around that, whether you're denying it or, you know, admitting to it in some way. So sometimes when we think about why there is sort of this eye widening issue, though, such a physiological response or arousal response with the spike in emotional intensity, especially in this case around that, I think it's known to, it's not deception. So it's not definitive in terms of deception, just to be clear. It often accompanies fear or surprise or deep internal reactions to stress. Um, Something like that can also serve as involuntary emphasis, almost as if his body is trying to make the denial more believable or powerful. And that's kind of what I was saying in my earlier example. You could say absolutely not, and you could have like the eye widening with it. And so that's kind of like a unconscious emphasis, maybe that a lot of you have experienced or done without even knowing it. And that's what I'm saying. It's kind of easy to do that. But in this particular case, when we talk about how Burke is number one, looking down a lot, and you have these eyes widening and stuff like that, that's kind of what the sort of the group of the behaviors is kind of sort of catching me off guard. It's like what I'm really looking at is how are you responding when somebody says, "Hey, let's talk about this." How are you responding? Are you very stoic? Are you open to talking about it, even though it's uncomfortable, right? Even though it's uncomfortable to, if you look at John Andrew, and some of his statements, John Andrew looks directly at the camera and he'll say, absolutely not. This is nonsense. This is ludicrous. And he'll look directly at the camera because John Andrew Ramsey was said not to be in town when this stuff was happening. I didn't know anything about it. So I can look at you. But in John Andrew's case, he's speaking from a perspective of saying, hey, this is my dad. This is my family. I know them. They would never do anything like this. And so anytime John Andrew is on camera, he's more so on the attack. I'm here to answer questions. And when I'm answering questions from a perspective of things that I've seen online. And so essentially, I'm responding to your question, but I'm also dually responding to things that I've seen online. So you guys know that, hey, I see you. And we have proof that he does see it. But hey, I see you and I don't like it. And so he's more so on the attack. But Burke is not on the attack. Burke is kind of like in a shell. Like he's talking, he has his arm, but then at some point in time.
Right up. Did you ever, JonBenet?
No, absolutely not.
Let's clear this up.
Because his arm was up on, like his arm was up on the armrest. But now he's gone into a position to where, of course, his legs are forward. But now he's gone into sort of like this hunched position. This is, just want to make sure I can get back to my place. So right here.
Did you ever stop at that?
So when we start talking about this instance of inappropriate behavior toward JonBenet, his arm is up on the armrest, right? So he's just kind of tapping his fingers, answering questions, moving his fingers and doing all this. But when we get deep into, let me see if
Did you ever?
No, not
train tracks.
Right. So he is answering questions right now, and my arm's right here, and then I got my arm between my legs, so I'm a little bit more comfortable. But then, see if I can find it. Oh, it might be a little bit earlier than this. Now, when we get a little bit later into the questioning, we get deeper into the questioning, he kind of shrivels back and shrivels up.
in any way.
He asked you just straight up. Did you ever?
In any way.
So when he says in any way, I think that was the first time when he, like his eyes, he just kind of enlarged his eyes.
He asked you just straight up. Did you ever?
And I'm asking because, or I'm saying it because it comes after the fact, right? It comes after his eyes enlarge after the fact. It's like he says no first, and then he thinks about it, and he thinks about the egregiousness or the sort of the craziness, just how crazy that crime is, or just how crazy the act is, and then he reacts. Like it's a late response, it almost seems like.
Please, JonBenet.
No, absolutely not.
And when he said no, absolutely not, he did not fully look up at Dr. Phil. until later on when he was done with his response. He said no. So if Dr. Phil is eye level right here, he said no, he's down here. Absolutely. And then he comes back down, not. Finishes the statement and then comes back to eye level. And then looks back down. And now he's in this sort of hunched position, whereas he was up like this with his arm on the armrest, but now he's in this hunch position with his hands clasped together. And you can kind of see on his face, it doesn't seem like he's ready for the question. Now we get this sort of grimace, like there's a little pain there now. You know, there's a little pain again, and I'm getting ready to kind of shoulder this next question. It's like, all right, here it comes. And I know it's coming. I know I got to sit through this. And this is the part of the interview that I most don't want to sit through, that I most don't want to face, that, you know, this is a part of the questioning and process that I really don't want to deal with. And so Burke is not, from what I can tell here, Burke does not really look like he wants to be here answering these questions.
Clear this up once and for all. Did you do anything to harm your sister? Did you murder your sister, JonBenet?
Okay, I want to address something. Before I address that, I kind of want to continue this. I want to continue this. So, we're talking about the spike in emotional intensity, often accompanied with fear, surprise, or deep internal reflection or reaction, to stress, can serve as an involuntary emphasis, almost as if his body is trying to make the denial more believable or powerful. And what is striking here is that both times he does this, two times he does this, he's also looking downward and he's avoiding that eye contact. And so this downward gaze in possibly might suggest discomfort. I'm uncomfortable in this situation. Now, of course, people might say, oh, absolutely, I'm uncomfortable. Wouldn't you be uncomfortable if somebody was asking you about your brother or your sister or this, that, and the third? I don't know if I'd be uncomfortable. I don't know, because we're not talking about somebody who's alive. We're talking about somebody who has been harmed by this, somebody who has been harmed, and we're speaking on a basis of after the fact. And what we've seen is that Burke can handle it, right? He said, eventually you stop crying, right? Eventually it goes away. So when you're talking about the discomfort as it relates to maybe death or something like that, apparently Burke has had time to say, you know, I'm just going on with my life. And he did just that. He went on with his life. In some of the interviews, Patsy said, Burke just, you know, he doesn't really want to talk about it. And he's done with it. So we never really talk about it as a family, you know. And Burke is like, the psychologist said Burke is, he's really trying to hold it together for you guys, but Burke is fine. Got nothing to worry about. And so now when we start, but as you ask more questions, you start to unlock more things, right? All this, I don't remember, I don't know, I just remember all this, that, and then, okay, let me keep on asking questions and see where we go, see how it gets. And so can also serve as involuntary emphasis and almost the body trying to sort of make you believe me and stuff like that. So what he does is this downward gaze might suggest discomfort. It might suggest emotional withdrawal or internal processing, which is a classic sign of cognitive offloading, where the brain disengages from social feedback to manage internal anxiety. Okay. And so I'm trying to, I'm essentially I'm in the middle of the conversation, and it would be weird if I just stopped talking to you, right? That would be weird. If like you're asking me a question and I'm responding and I just stop talking and I'm just like, well, yeah, to your question. That would be weird. That would be weird. And you'd be looking at me like, what's wrong with this guy? I mean, like, probably like you are now. Burke cannot do that. He's aware that I cannot disengage. Humans and just in general are aware I cannot disengage from this conversation. You're looking directly at me. Dr. Phil is trying to do everything in his power to make this young man feel comfortable, right? He's not trying to be overbearing. He's not trying to surprise him with questions. He's not trying to catch him with the gotcha. What he's trying to do is he's asking these questions, and he seems like he's being direct and maybe a little insensitive at times, but he's doing this so that he can go back to America and say, you guys are wrong. This is the case. That's why Dr. Phil is doing that. But some of these things seem to make Burke uncomfortable, even though Burke seems to know what this interview is for, what's coming, possibly where he's going. And Dr. Phil is trying to do a good job of leading him through and saying, we're going to go look at these videos in this room, and I'm going to ask you these questions and so on and so forth. There's just a discomfort. There seems to be a level of discomfort with trying to be believed, trying to act believable in front of Dr. Phil. Even though you know that Dr. Phil is on your side, I'm still trying to act believable. But when you and I'm showing signs of comfort, but then you start to ask me things that I feel really uncomfortable with, or there might be, we know that I got to get this right. This is an important part of the story. I have to get this right. Now we start to see the body language change and shift, and our hands go in our lap between our legs, and I'm squeezing and I'm hunched over and I'm kind of like seeping like the Homer Simpson. I think it's either Homer Simpson or Bart Simpson meme or picture that you may or may not have seen, where like he just kind of, or the GIF that he just kind of goes back into the bushes and hides and stuff like that, just kind of disappearing. And that's kind of what Burke is doing. He's kind of disappearing into the couch. The more that Dr. Phil digs around this inappropriate behavior, Burke starts to lean back and sort of try to disappear into the couch or disappear somewhere. And he stops making eye contact. And he knows that he should be making eye contact. But then later on, after he answers and he gets it all out and he's looking all around and this and that, then he looks back up at Dr. Phil like, oh yeah, I should be making eye contact. So he's trying to disengage socially to manage internal anxiety. But I have to keep talking to you because it'd be weird if I just disengage, right? I got to keep talking to you. But some part of my mind disengages because there's some sort of internal process. So as I'm looking at Burke, if that's the case, that means that you could be looking at Burke and you could see, if you understood the sign, you could see Burke trying to manage some sort of internal anxiety or some sort of internal war that's going on within him. And that might just make you, it doesn't mean he's guilty. It just means that you might ask, what happened right there? Like, have you ever been talking to somebody and you say something or you ask them a question and they're going along and they're floating along and then everything is fine. And then you ask them something specific or you tell them something specific or whatever you do specific. And they're like, and they, they kind of jolt, and you're like, wait. What is that? Because they were in motion and they were in a forward motion and they were going along. They were about to start, answering those questions pretty rapidly. I'm good. Oh yeah. Oh, nope. Absolutely. Yep. Because you guys are on the same page, but then you ask me something. I'm like, oh, I got to think about that. I should say no, but my brain is saying yes, but I got to yank my brain back over and say, no. This is what we got to say. This is the answer. Because you can't think about this right now. You can't have thoughts about this right now. You need to have thoughts about this later. And that's, if you're looking at Burke, that's what it seems to be the case when you're trying to manage that internal anxiety. So his posture during this exchange, as we said, becomes more restricted, though not fully closed off. Burke shifts into a less relaxed position, keeping his hands in his lap and shrinking into himself. This kind of body language, especially in the context of sort of these direct accusations being thrown at him, he's shrinking under the weight of these accusations. He's not standing there saying, no, absolutely not. I did not. Just think about this. You have one person who did you do this? Did you do this? They would not be going, they would not start off like this and then start going like this. That wouldn't make sense. If they would stay there and say, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Burke started doing just that. No, 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 no. You see what I'm saying? So this kind of body language, especially in the context of direct accusations, often mirrors what we see in individuals under perceived threat. Oh, yeah, I might be under some type of threat. So, as if they're trying to minimize their presence, psychologically, it's a form of self-protection. Correct. Because I'm trying to protect myself. I'm trying to get away, right? Common in people who feel cornered or scrutinized. Isn't that cornered behavior? That's what we said before. This looks like he's cornered. Cornered or scrutinized. It doesn't necessarily indicate guilt. Of course, we want to reestablish that. Doesn't necessarily indicate guilt, but does suggest he's experiencing strong emotional discomfort or anticipatory fear. We talked about a little bit, another sign of anticipatory fear just a couple of seconds earlier, when he's sort of like wincing on this side. He's like kind of wincing. It's like, okay. And I got my hand, I'm hiding one hand between my legs, but I got another hand on here, but I don't know what you're going to do. So I'm like if you go to give a kid a shot and they're like, you haven't even touched them yet, but you go to give a kid a shot and they're like, they're kind of already kind of trying to defend. They're already trying to defend themselves. Right. And so, anyways, sort of like this anticipatory fear. And so the most curious moment comes when Dr. Phil references a past incident involving a golf club when Burke was asked whether or not he had actually JonBenet with it. And Burke responds with the phrase, not on purpose. So, and this kind of trying to tie everything together, he responds, not on purpose, right? But the manner in which he says, not on purpose, has sort of like that tonal recoil, like we said. And so the subtle backward emotional movement mimics this, what I might call this psychological equivalent of someone screeching to a halt, like a cartoon. You're in motion, but you're screeching to a halt. It's as if his voice tries to push forward with confidence, only to be pulled back midstream. So I'm trying to speak forward with confidence, but you starting to ask me some stuff that I got to think about. I got to think about it, and I got to think deeply about. I can't just talk and say, no, absolutely not. I never did that. Yeah, this is the case. We would always do this at Christmas time, blah, blah, blah. I can no longer speak like that. I have to start kind of backpedaling and saying, well, hold on now. You start asking me some stuff I got to think about. I know you're trying to help me, but wait a minute, And so sort of this, like we said before, this verbal backpedaling is particularly important because it introduces that ambiguity. So saying not on purpose is technically that denial of intent, but the way that you sort of frame yourself might lead to some of that leakage and might mean that yes, I did the action. We're going to argue on the intent here, right? And so when all of these elements are taken together, the widened eyes, the gaze aversion, the restrained posture, the vocal retreat, what we might see is not behavior of someone who is confidently denying wrongdoing. So there's no confidence. It's possible that he's not even confident in what he's saying, but instead it might resemble a person who is navigating deep emotional conflict, potentially reliving trauma or suppressing distressing memories. Whether or not he's guilty of anything wrong, these are micro behaviors that may suggest that this particular line of questioning taps into something psychologically charged and deeply uncomfortable for him. So it lets us know and that's what I'm saying, if you see somebody that it seems like you're tapping into something emotionally triggering for them, this is where you might start to ask more questions. And like I said before, Burke did this thing.
Next week, Burke answers the questions that have been haunting him for years. Take a look. Suppose more than a decade They're knocking on your door wanting to talk to you again.
This is my final interview. Who killed JonBenet Ramsey? My child was murdered Christmas night. Don't ever forget.
Made a big issue out of the date that you put on the say the people that say you put the 25th because you knew when she died.
And that statement by John, don't ever forget it. I mean, why would we forget it? And you said this was your last interview, but yet, and that was in 2016, but yet you're still doing interviews. Still doing them. Still doing them. But you said, because we read an article, because people have asked before, why does John keep saying that JonBenet was killed on the 25th of December? We don't know that. And what does it suggest if John, is saying that? Well, we said, okay, on a Daily Camera article or something like that, it was reported that John said, this, I wanted to be associated with this, and there's, just the beauty of it, and I don't want the world to ever forget. And so he comes back and he says something completely unrelated. My daughter was killed on January 25th, or I'm sorry, on December 25th, Christmas, and don't you ever forget it. How do you know that? How do you know that your daughter was killed on the 25th? You were asleep. How would you know for certain? Why are you speaking in certain terms to say that this is what I wanted to get to? Because that's weird.
Did you ever, once and for all, did you do anything to harm your sister?
You saw that. Did you do anything to harm your sister? How his eyes start and then they dart back. They start going left and then they dart back to the right.
Let's clear this up once and for all. Did you?
And so I'm going to pause it right there so you know it's coming. So you can see that his eyes start off to the right and then they start going left and then they go fast to the left and then right back to the right.
Do anything to harm your sister? Did you?
And then he looks down. He gets back to the right and then he looks, and it's like, it's not a straight look down, but it's a like hesitant look down.
Murder your sister, JonBenet.
And now he keeps looking down like this. So, of course, that didn't sit well with me. And weirdly. So let's deal with the fact that it starts on the right. So this is where Burke begins, often associated with constructed thoughts. You're starting off to the right, maybe visual or verbal fabrication, maybe in some, natural language processing models. There's some sort of there's some sort of constructed thought happening, right? And so he begins to slowly drift to the left. And sort of this slow movement could represent tentative memory access, as if part of him is trying to retrieve a memory. So like, I'm kind of going over here and I'm going to access a memory, but we will see how far we get to that memory. And then halfway when he gets to the left about something like that, there's like this sudden, I kind of read this sudden speed increase. Like he picks up speed. So he's just kind of going, and then he does that. Like he gets about halfway and then goes like that and speeds up and then shoots back to the right with his eyes. So halfway to the left, this sudden speed increase, this pickup in speed might suggest a mental alarm. Like his brain has realized he's approaching a zone he shouldn't access. So I'm going to access, when you ask me this question, I'm starting off over here. I'm thinking about constructing something over here on my right-hand side. But then I start going to my left to think about what I need to access to answer this question. And by the time I get over there, by the time I get halfway over there, alarm bells start going off. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I don't know if I even want to access this side of my brain. Access what? What are you accessing? Okay. And then when he fully hits to the left, this is where for a split second, He may be in a memory or experiencing emotional recall, which is a point of psychological discomfort or inner truth. So when I get to the left, just for a split second, I accessed that memory. So I started off thinking about, should I answer not so truthfully, or should I just come up with an answer, or how am I going to construct an answer, or what have you? Maybe not truthfully, but how am I going to get my thoughts together? And then when I go to the left to try to start thinking about how to construct something, I start kind of getting hesitant about approaching where I need to go in my brain to access the information I need to answer this question. By the time I get over there, I fully access like a thought, but then I come back because I may not like what I'm seeing. And so when he says, "Have you harmed your sister in any way?" I'm starting off, and then I'm thinking, then there may be something there that I don't want to talk about. Darts quickly back, so fully hits the left. He might be struggling with that in his body language. That sinking into yourself has already told us that he feels uncomfortable. And so when he starts to do this with his eyes, we see another element of discomfort when his eyes fully hit to the left. And then just for a second, he accesses that memory recall. So then darts quickly back to the right. And so this fast reversal in a classic, maybe emotional, in a classic model is maybe more so indicative of emotional regulation. So sort of snapping out of it is what I mean. I've touched on that recall, but like we said before, when we talk about that sort of social anxiety and internal conflict, right? The societal feedback and internal conflict. I am standing here in front of you. I need to be answering this question, but I've accessed something in my brain, and I can't just sit here and look at you weird. You know, I mean, I gotta say something. So I gotta snap back out of it. I gotta snap back into reality. And you've asked me something to where I want to go off and trail into the sunset, but I can't. I gotta stick with you. And so it seems that this is what Burke is doing. And so he's got to regulate that emotion. Whatever he's accessed over there, I gotta regulate that. And I gotta say, hey, look, we can't stay over there. I can't, because if I stay too long, there might be a problem. And so snapping back into sort of this, snapping back in out of recall and back into constructed or defensive posture. So it's often involuntary and tied to avoidance, denial, or repression. When you do this act to where his eyes dart like that, it can be tied to avoidance, denial, or repression. So this eye movement doesn't suggest calm denial or simple memory recall. Instead, it maps onto what behavioral analysts call a micro-conflict response, where the body involuntarily reacts to internal stress. So this is involuntary, like this is something that is coming up automatically. And so that's where the emotional regulation has to come in, because when you think about the amygdala and you think about the amygdala and you think about the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, and how the amygdala is sort of like that knee-jerk reaction to something, and that's the fast process of thinking. That's the first thing I think. And then you think about that ventromedial prefrontal cortex and how that is the sort of the slower, more logical, more deliberate pacing thought process, right? So the amygdala, whatever thought comes in your mind is going to hit the amygdala first, and you got to practice over time. You need more experience to practice over time, not to cuss that person out. When somebody says something to you, the younger you would have just cussed them out automatically. But you had to slow down over time. You had to train yourself. Can't cuss everybody out. I got to keep my job. You know, I got to tell my spouse I love them. I can't say what I want. And so that's where the prefrontal cortex comes in and says, hey, you got to calm down. You can't do the first thing that comes to your mind all the time. And so that's the sort of knee-jerk reaction. And that's the internal stress that he's feeling, to where his body has reacted, but that a regulation has to pull him back and say, we can't, not right now. You are in public. And so he has oh yeah, that's right. I am in public. Get your eyes on Dr. Phil. Look at Dr. Phil. Answer the question. Yeah. So you see what I mean? So the acceleration toward the left shows that something about the question triggered a deeper emotional memory, but the quick dart back to the right indicates a sharp internal shutdown or redirect, like the mind slamming a door on whatever was surfacing. This is often seen in people recalling suppressed trauma, those hiding a partial truth, or individuals who fear the consequences of what they remember. The sudden shift is not physical. It's not just physical, it's emotional. So for a split moment of exposure that you're exposed, just for a split second, just very quick, that you're exposed to this, followed by a self-protective retreat fast. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex has kicked in fast and said, you are in public. You cannot act that way. So when asked by Dr. Phil if he had done anything to harm his sister, his eyes revealed a striking pattern of internal conflict, much like his body did seconds earlier. His eyes initially fixed toward his right, often associated with constructed thought, then began slowly drifting left, a shift commonly interpreted as accessing memory. Okay. He's accessing memory. However, midway through that movement, his eyes sharply accelerated leftward, as if propelled by a sudden internal trigger or an emotional spike. And upon reaching the far left, he immediately darted his gaze back to the right at equal speed. And so this pattern, slow recall, abrupt acceleration, and rapid withdrawal, reflects a classic psychological defense mechanism, the involuntary surfacing of a suppressed or troubling memory, followed by an immediate attempt to shut it down. It suggests acute cognitive dissonance or a strong emotional response to the question rather than calm denial. Why would that be there is my question. You don't have a memory of anything. You don't know anything. Why would your eyes be doing that? Why would that behavior be happening? And we can ask the same question, because your behavior deceives you. The behavior that contradicts you, I should say. Your behavior contradicts you. The behavior that you're showing me, I know what you're telling me, but the behavior that you're showing me contradicts all of that. Just like Patsy. Patsy can tell you, oh, I had nothing to do with this. But then she goes and says, I have flashbacks of hearing my daughter. How so? Because you said dreams and flashbacks. How would you have a flashback? How so? John never has that problem. John just sees he and JonBenet in a field of lilies, smiling and spinning in the sun. I'm exaggerating, but basically he said, I just remember her being happy in my dream. She's happy and everything's all right. Paraphrasing. But Patsy is like, no, I don't remember her I don't remember those final moments in a good light at all. In fact, I remember the worst. And Burke is like showing you that Burke is telling us one thing, and Burke is showing, like, as we've talked about in this analysis, Burke is telling us one thing, but his body language is doing another. The totality of his body language. We're not just talking about somebody being socially just having a certain level of social anxiety or being socially awkward. We're not just talking about that. We're talking about somebody sitting in front of you trying to defend themselves psychologically, and their body is responding to the attempt to defend themselves. That's what's sitting in front of you. And we ask why. We're talking about somebody who makes movements. When I say, what happens to your sister? And you say, I know what happened to my sister. Why do you keep on asking me what happened to her? I know what happened to her. No, what do you think? I think somebody took her quietly. And did what? Oh, I think they did. And you make the arm motions. We don't have a report released to you guys yet. How do you know? You guys are not even looking at reports. How do you know? You guys got something going on. And it always triangulates around Burke and Patsy. Burke can't keep his body language in check, and Patsy can't keep her dreams in check. They are starting to contradict one another. Because John and Patsy say the bat doesn't belong to us, but it had carpet fibers on its statement of fact. And Burke says, that's my bat. I think you get it. I think you get it. That's everything I got for you. Like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments. Appreciate you. Much love, much respect. And until next time, take it easy.